Colin King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's fair to say that the bill as it stands has been well canvassed during its third reading, but I'd just like to make one or 2 points before I sit down again, and that is the complexities that we are facing as we implement this very worthy bill, the National Animal Identification and Tracing Bill. One has to stop and think about the million or so cattle that are on lifestyle blocks that are going to have to come into this system, and that sort of starts to illustrate the complexity. We start talking about sheep, and already stud breeders are doing it with their high frequency identification systems, but we've just got to be mindful that the introduction of the National Identification and Tracing Bill is appropriate that it's cattle and deer. Effectively cattle on the 1st of July 2012 and then deer on the 1st of March 2013. With regards to the difference between the transponders, the low frequency and high frequency, just to give a bit of a flavour to the difference, the low frequency can only be read at about 1 metre, and that's where that debate crept in with regards to the high frequency. It was possible to read the animals' tags out in the middle of the paddock about some 200 to 300 metres away. So there's still a wee way to go before we actually see innovation around this area, and I would imagine that we certainly do need to keep a very close eye on what the rest of the world is doing. Because we do sell to those 5% of the world that have the incomes to choose what they eat and are prepared to pay for it. So it's very important that we protect New Zealand's food safety record, its credentials. They are the platinum level, and it's something we can't take for granted. There's no doubt a lot of potential within the system of NATE, the farming technologies that will be applied in the future, and I know that our farmers and our community of New Zealand are very quick on the uptake on modern technologies. So that having been said, this legislation is important. There's a view out in the farming community, or there was a view for a while, that if it was this good or that good, why aren't the industry driving it? And one has to think a wee bit long and hard to answer that question. But the answer is that there's a lot of people in the meat industry that their main financial drivers are not the meat. And you've only got to look at the dairy industry. There's hundreds of thousands a tonne of beef going through to the market that come off dairy farms. And their main driver on their whole breeding systems geared around milk production and butterfat production, milk solids. So to give it the integrity and credibility that it needs from an international point of view, it was important that we draw up this legislation. So we overcome those obstacles. I don't find anything overly offensive at farmers being concerned about costs being heaped upon them. They have got to run very, very challenging operations in challenging economic times, and it's good to see that while this bill's been implemented, it is during a time when farmers are able to see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So, Mr Speaker, this is very good legislation. It's been well handled by the Select Committee on both sides of the House, and it's high time that it quickly passes into law. So it's a pleasure to support this bill.
Call Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as others have done, I would like to congratulate some of the other